Welcome to 10 with Zen, our podcast series for school leaders and educators. Today we're talking with Angela Holdsworth. Angela, you're the CEO at the Seaview Trust, which has 5 schools and a college. You also provide initial teacher training. You're a regional representative for NASEN, for Whole School Send, and the Teaching School Council National Send representative. So welcome, Angela, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Helen.
So at the moment, it's tough. We all know it's really tough. I know your schools are open and you've got approximately a third to half of your usual cohort of students in. What are the priorities for students with SEND this term?
I guess that the priorities for students with SEND are actually, in many ways the same as the priorities for all learners in all schools. And that's really about ensuring that they have great access to remote and blended learning opportunities. Because very few children are in school all of the time, and therefore we've got to get that balance right between home learning and learning in school and make sure that it's connected and meaningful. So the key difficulty that learners with SEND may have is that they're often used to a much higher level of support when they're in school, and how we replicate that in the home environment is really difficult without making the parent a full-time teaching assistant, which is obviously inappropriate, and most parents have not got capacity, either the time or the sort of patience to do that. And as a mum myself, I know how difficult it is to educate your own children. It's very different to educating children in a school environment. I think one of the things that we need to be thinking about with SEND learners, though, is the holistic approach. So when we're in school, we're very much thinking whole child for our SEND learners. So not just the academic, but also the additional therapies, the additional sort of health, well-being, mental health and well-being work that we do, and how we replicate that at home is something we need to think about. One of the things that most children with SEND will really benefit from is really strong and good routines. So the more routine we can put in place and the more predictable that routine is, so that children know at the beginning of the week what the week will look like. And yes, there may need to be some changes because the unexpected happens, but to actually sort of foreshadow that as much as possible is really important. Typically, those children who've got an education health care plan will be getting good support from the school. Most mainstream schools are open for those children, will have them in. Most special schools have got an offer there, although because that's all of their learners, they may not be able to offer places all day, every day for all of their children and keep everyone else safe. So I think for those learners, talk to your school, find out what's going on. That's the most healthy way of working. For children who are normally on SEND support, their support can often be slightly more subtle. So it's sort of important to understand, and for the school to talk to the family about what they would normally be doing, and for class teachers to share the specific approaches that work for that child.
That's really helpful, thank you. And I thought your comment about routine is really important, because that's something which can be done at home regardless of what's happening with school learning, can't it? Actually sticking to a routine that helps build security is really important, and that is something that we can all do.
Absolutely. And I think, for everybody's mental health, whether your child's got additional needs or not, having those good routines and being able to say, right, well, schoolwork's finished now, we're back to normal, this is our normal home environment, is really important.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Thank you. So what issues will school leaders need to understand in order to make sure good decisions and plans are in place?
I think one of the things that we need to keep at the forefront, which should be at the forefront for all leaders, because every leader is a leader of SEND, and I firmly believe that, and that is absolutely the case in our trust schools. I think inclusion, not exclusion. So where things can be done for all children who are remote learning or on a blended offer, then we should do them for everybody. And if they are things which actually support learners with SEND better, that's fantastic. Because everything you do for a learner with SEND won't undermine the education of learners who haven't got SEND. It will actually help reinforce, but it will make those learners who do have additional needs not feel quite as different. So I think it's really important in these difficult times that everybody feels that they're part of the whole. So trying to make sure that where, you know, an offer is being made that is different, it's very obvious what's the general offer that everybody gets that's really good, high quality teaching, and then what's the additionality that we're making for these specific children, but make them feel and their families feel included, because that's so important to us all, really, as human beings. The other key issue that I think, you know, we need to understand is around risk and risk assessment. So for some special needs, there are real risks around being in schools because, you know, we have children who have medical needs, and therefore working with families, understanding how the family feels, understanding the knowledge that families hold. I mean, parents are primary educators. They're the first people, they know their child the best, and therefore we need to have those conversations with parents about, is it safe for your child to be in school? These are the things we're doing, being really open and honest about what's possible and what's not possible. And then what would you like to do in this situation? And not vilifying parents who don't want to send their children, and understanding that parents who do want to send their children in, you know, sort of are doing that because, you know, in the global and holistic picture, they are feeling that it would be a benefit their child to be in school rather than be at home all of the time. So working with those individuals and that risk assessment is so important.
Okay, so there's some really important messages there about seeing people as individuals, risk assessments around health and care and safety, which are really important, and inclusion, which underpins all of our work, doesn't it? So that's really helpful. Thank you. Communication is something which I think we've all felt it very hard when communication and guidelines have changed very last minute, very late at night. How can communications with parents and students be effectively and sensitively delivered when some of those messages are really quite hard to hear, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think, you know, sort of it's been very difficult for school leaders in the current climate because decision making has been so sort of rapid, and change has been so rapid, and none of us as human beings cope well with change. We all like our routines, as we talked about earlier. So it is important that, you know, sort of we inform people as soon as possible, but I think sometimes that's quite difficult because, you know, for large schools, for trusts who are trying to get out sort of central messaging, you are then communicating with large numbers of people, and that then isn't bespoke to the individual. We know that communication is best when we can make it relevant to the individual that we're communicating with, and, you know, there hasn't been the time and space to do that. I think the key thing is where people have sort of received those communications and been distressed in any way by them, it's so important to get back to that individual, talk to them on a one-to-one, understand their context, which will be unique, and sort of provide an offer and support which will work for them as a family. I think it's so important to be honest, and it's so important to be respectful. And whenever we're working with families, you know, they are the things, you know, that we should be thinking about in terms of how would I feel in this situation, and, you know, are we getting this right? So, you know, be open, take the criticism. There's a lot of it out there. You know, take it on the chin, acknowledge it, and then explain why you have made the decisions you've made. Most people, parents, staff, everybody, want to reach an understanding with people. Again, it's part of our human nature to try to get to a balanced position. So, you know, treat people with respect, and my hope would be that we take everybody with us. It's a challenging time for us all.
It is, and there's again some lovely messages there about understanding, which requires a lot of listening, doesn't it? So remembering that our communication isn't just what we tell, is actually what we hear and how we understand and how we speak to people's concerns, really.
Totally.
And actually that whole point about why, helping people understand why the decisions that have been made have been made. And a lovely thing about actually responding quickly to people who are upset, who are concerned by something. Okay. One last question, Angela, because time presses on. Can you share some of the really practical solutions that you've been able to put into practice at the Seaview Trust? And we're just thinking maybe one or two ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, one of the things that I need to mention through my NASON and Whole School Send work is there's some great resources on the NASON Gateway. And at the moment, NASON membership is free. So I would really advise any teachers out there to get signed up to the NASON Gateway, get on there, look at the resources. The Oak Academy resources, again, as a trust, we've actually been involved with providing teachers and doing some of the curriculum planning for the specialist curriculum. Really useful resources, not absolutely perfect. Not all lessons go exactly according to plan, but I think that's so healthy, particularly for teachers and parents, to see the reality is we're not all perfect all day, every day. And, the therapeutic elements that are on there are also really helpful for families. I think that actually using some, so teaching young people with additional needs to wear masks. Now, they don't have to wear masks, but it's much more inclusive if they do. So actually teaching them about why we have masks and how to put one on safely. That's something that a parent can do with a child at home, which is actually a really positive sort of interaction you could do together. And then thinking about where there is remote learning happening, working with the child before you do the learning, letting them do their learning and then working with them afterwards to make sure that they can actually embed the learning. And I suppose the final thing I'd say is all of the activities you would be doing in the home normally, can you make them educational? So if you're doing the washing, can you pair the socks? Can you sort the colours? Because they're the sorts of things where children don't feel like they're learning, particularly young children or children with more complex needs, but they can actually be learning loads whilst you're doing it. So don't make it really difficult. And if you can't get the schoolwork done that comes home, don't beat yourself up over it. You've tried, and that's enough. And just be kind to yourself, really. It would be my key message.
That's a good message, actually. Be kind to yourself, definitely. Angela, just tell us what NASON stands for. I'm not sure all our listeners will know.
National Association of Special Educational Needs. And then Whole School Send is a branch of NASON, which is contracted by the DFE to do work to support children in schools and to support school staff in getting the right continuing professional development to be, the best teachers and the best support staff they can be. We also work with local authorities as well to help them where they've had a challenging Ofsted review.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that. Angela, it's been brilliant to talk with you today. Thank you so much for sharing openly and honestly. And we wish you and the Seaview team every success with the work you're doing. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks very much, Helen. Thank you for having me.